Thank you for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Govern. Now, today I'm going to be jumping into a story that's a little bit different than some of the stories that I often talk about when I'm looking at local government fraud and waste and corruption. And partially because this story kind of went down a number of different avenues, I think it's useful for any activist that cares about what's going on in their local government just to kind of learn some lessons from it. And maybe it makes it a little bit more easier for you to be a little bit more effective where you're digging into stuff where you live. Specifically, I basically am titling this one of those situations where in Thurston County here, where basically everybody likes to break the law, and it seems like everybody who works there breaks the law. But in this case, the law breaking ended up kind of canceling itself out, and it wasn't as bad as it originally looked like. And it's a weird story, and I want to get into it. Again, anytime that you're going to spend any time looking into local government and looking at the corruption, the law breaking, and the incompetence, it oftentimes becomes a tangled web of chaos, confusion, and a bit of wonkishness as you dig into it, because they don't like to make government simple. It's much easier if it's more complicated, at least for them. Before I go too much further, though, just to do a quick reminder, if you haven't hit the subscribe and like button down below, please do that at your earliest convenience. The more people who do that, it makes some of these videos a lot more visible to others, and it just helps get our word and the message out to a much wider and larger audience. So once again, I am digging into Thurston County. And even if you don't live in Thurston County, this is actually a good video for you if you're an activist and you want to dig into stuff. I focus on Thurston County. It's where I live. It's an easy place for me to look at sometimes. And I confess, I have not been paying enough attention to the chaos in my own county, and I thought it was time to start looking back there. So that's why I dug into it here. And this story today, I think, is helpful in analyzing what can happen. And specifically, I was really looking at the property tax issues in Thurston County. And this kind of just came to my attention. I've done a lot of stories about Thurston County before. I've done stories about crazy tax increase proposals they've had in the past, about the county manager and elected officials forging public documents, basically, and trying to, do all kinds of crazy stuff. The very horrible clown commission that we tend to have here, our staff infection, where we are hiring way too many Evergreen State College grads. And of course, our dumpster fire budget, which I did deal with recently, and just a lot of other problems that are going on in Thurston County. But of course, one of the things that people oftentimes mention, and it's very understandably, is they say, please just stop raising taxes, because it's just an endless, bottomless pit of tax dollars that do seem to be wasted. And so this kind of led me back into digging into Thurston County and just talking around, of course. And like everyone else in Thurston County, I had my property tax increase as well this last year. In fact, I wasn't alone, and probably if you live in Thurston County, you weren't either, because 73.8% of you, all of us, we had our property tax increase. And in fact, 27.2% of us had it actually increase more than $500 a year this year over what it was last year, which is a fairly large increase. Some of these are actually thousands of dollars of an increase more. It's a substantial amount for a lot of people. 24%, though, actually did have their property tax decrease, mostly just by a little bit. And then, of course, 7.3% had it actually drop by $500 or more. Now, most of those people are probably Democrat Party donors and party faithful, and sometimes they get rewarded for their political affiliations. Now, what really dug me into kind of driving into this was going back to the enabling resolution and this is what happens every year, every county, in order to determine what your property taxes, or I should say set the level for your property taxes the next year. It's required under statute that the county commissioners have to approve a resolution, essentially, that just says, hey, here's going to be the tax levels for next year. And that's what they approve. This is normal. They've been doing it in Washington State for probably close to 100 years or more. And if you look back on the 2025 property taxes, they were signed back on December 3rd, 2024 of last year. It was Resolution 16476, and I've linked to it down below if you want to read it for yourself. And this is what I started with, just, hey, what did they approve for taxes? Let's take a look at it. And immediately when you look at this ordinance, or I should say resolution, something stands out right away, particularly if you paid any attention to this stuff in the past, and see if you can see the common element here. There's basically 4 levy amounts that the county has control over, where the county commissioners determine what that amount is. They have no control over anything except for these 4. And one of them's roads, One of them's conservation futures, one of them's a Medic 1 levy rate, and the other one's the general county expenses. And all of these are assessed on your property taxes. Well, that's right. If you look at this, the same thing probably pops out to you that popped out to me. They're all perfectly and conveniently round numbers. And by the way, that's the first time I've ever seen that in decades of looking at documents like this. And you won't see documents like this from any other county either. This is unusual. Usually it's really literally rounded down to the penny, 25 cents or 22 cents or 1 penny. I mean, they have a very specific number. And Thurston County's always done that until this year. It was very strange. That, of course, is going to be what raises red flags and makes you dig a little bit deeper, which caused me to go back to a publicly available document, which is called the Levy Limitations Worksheet. And they have this for each one of these levies. And if you look at this under the county budget, so the county levy portion of the property tax budget, their highest lawful levy, according to the spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet looks like kind of a document it's one of these fill-in-the-blank PDF files. It's tied to some spreadsheet. And what you do, and I'm sure it looks like it was created by the Department of Revenue, just for each of the 39 counties, probably so that local staff, especially in smaller counties, as there's turnover, they don't screw it up. And it just gives you some basic formulas to put in so you get to the correct number. It's nothing particularly exotic. It's just a useful tool to look at. And again, this is the number that I would probably expect to see in that resolution from the county government. You can see it right here. But then if you look on the other second page of the sheet, you can see that staff just filled in a number that had nothing to do with any formula. It was just a number made up out of thin air, 53 million, which, by the way, just in case you've taken Common Core in the last few years and you're not familiar with math, or you're like over half the students graduated from Washington State Public Schools and you probably can't do math, this 53 million is actually more than the $380.01 that you would otherwise have your taxes set for. So then I looked at, of course, at the other levy worksheets. Let's look at roads. 26 million and change for the max limit, and it looks like the commissioners signed off on 26,500,000, which is illegal, and if they went to collect that money, they'd be in trouble. Then you look at the levy limitation worksheet for Medic 1. Maximum limit was 13 million. The commissioners signed off on 21,500,000. Again, round number, substantially different than the maximum limit that they had in the levy worksheet. I will make a point here on the Medic 1. There is another column in here because there had been an improved levy lid lift for Medic 1 that the taxpayers had the option to shoot down or approve, and they approved it. And so that increases the number quite a bit, but it didn't increase it to actually the amount that the county commissioners signed off on here at the 21,500,000. So no matter what, that number was absolutely illegal and couldn't be legally collected. And then you saw the final one is the smallest one the county does. This is the Conservation Futures Fund. There's a maximum limit of 1.6 million and change. And of course, the county commissioners in the document that they actually signed, the resolution, they bumped it up to 1.7 million. Now, listen, this is all worth looking at because one of the questions you would ask is, well, who broke the law? Because it's clearly that whatever they did here, it was wrong. Well, the commissioners clearly approved fake property tax limits on all four funds. That's what they signed off on. Fake numbers that weren't real, that were not based in reality, and that if they were actually collected according to the resolution that they passed, the commissioners would be substantially in trouble. That is breaking the law. Then, of course, staff, who basically provides these fake property tax limits, they did that on all four funds. And it was absurd. And that's one of the reasons, again, and it stands out because it was a round number. And you look at it and you say, well, what the heck's going on here? Clearly, there's something wrong. And one of the questions that I had was, well, did anybody present any information? Did they explain it at all? And in fact, indeed, they were confronted. And Summer Miller, who's the budget and finance manager, that's her right here, she actually responded to a question from John Pettit, who's an engaged citizen, and he is involved quite a bit in budget issues with Thurston County. He had sent him a request saying, hey, why are these numbers round? How come they don't match the levy worksheets? Looks like you approved illegal over limit numbers. And she said, yep, we certainly did, and gave just some kind of ridiculous excuse, especially if you know that she was breaking the law in order to do this. And they were breaking the law when they approved illegal over limit tax revenue increases. So what this really looks like, of course, is holy cow, we've caught the commissioners, Thurston County commissioners and the staff, violating state law and illegally approving substantial illegal over-limit amounts for property tax collections. I mean, listen, this is actually a big deal. That illegally collecting far more money than you're allowed to statutorily from all these tens of thousands of property owners, knowing that you did it illegally, according to the staff email, knowing that that number is just fictitious and you just made it up. That is a serious problem, and it would generate the ability to actually file a class action lawsuit against the county on behalf of all property owners who had paid those illegal taxes. And in fact, I was all ready to do that and had a quick draft up of a class action lawsuit on this case, identified some plaintiffs, but of course still doing more research. And this really gets to the next part of this video, which is you always want to look at other sources. Anybody that's gone to one of my Doge trading classes, always avoid bias confirmation. You want to check thoroughly, make sure that your information's correct. You can't get too much caught up in analysis paralysis, but you do want to at least get in there deep enough to figure out, is this absolutely correct? It looks like these guys are breaking the law, and in fact, they've confirmed that they're breaking the law, but is everybody breaking the law all around them? Have all the checks and balances just flown off the system, and did everybody decide to break the law? After all, the commissioners make this approval, and now suddenly that's the tax that's approved, and why would anybody in government do anything differently? Now, this forced me to go down the rabbit hole to the assessor's office, because that's kind of your last little check here. Did the assessor's office also sign off on these illegal over-limit tax increases? And if you've known anything about my background, I actually ran for the assessor's office in 2010, most exciting position in government ever, very wonkish, and I am eternally thankful to the guy who's currently there who beat me in that race at the time. And thank God, if I knew back then what I know now, I would have won, and that would have been terrible. So he's really saved me a tragic fate had I won that position. But nevertheless, there's somebody else in there, and I've had to do a number of stories about him because one of the problems was his repeated effort to shake down the employees who work there for campaign contributions to his political campaign. A lot of shady deeds that have gone on in the assessor's office over the years. And one of the things I would know is that the current elected assessor wouldn't have any clue what's going on. He's never in the office and doesn't pay any attention. But fortunately for him and frankly for the taxpayers of Thurston County, there are serious people who work there. And even though it doesn't look like anybody serious works for the county commissioners anymore, it does appear that there's some serious people still in these little vestiges of local government. And in order for me to verify, did the assessor actually collect illegal over-limit tax dollars according to what was requested by the county commissioners, I had to go to what's called a statistical report of 2024 assessments for taxes payable in 2025. Now listen, these aren't necessarily very easy documents to get. They are technically online, but to find them, you kind of really have to know what you're looking for. I will link to this particular document down below, and if you're capable of actually sorting it out, good for you. It does take a little while to look through it. Nevertheless, there's good information there, and it was very helpful for me and for those of us looking into this issue, because what we found out was actually good news. Number one, the local assessor employees, again, probably the employees more than the elected official, because there was no evidence that the elected official had any clue what was going on. But fortunately, they ignored county commissioners and the staff infection numbers that were presented to them illegally through that resolution. Now, they're not supposed to do that. That's probably a violation of the law themselves, but it's better to break that law than it is to break the law for the state of Washington and illegally over-collect money, tax dollars that you're not owed. So that was good. They followed the state law instead on the maximum tax limits by fund. And that's a good thing for the taxpayers of Thurston County. Again, it doesn't probably make the sting of the absurd increases in taxes over the last years feel any better, but at least on this issue, it looks like somebody in their law breaking by ignoring what the county commissioners told them to do and following a different law, they actually helped cancel out the law breaking that was going on at the county commission level. And so in the end, essentially, everybody seems to break the law all the time in Thurston County. In this case, one person's law breaking helped stop the other people's law breaking from becoming a much bigger fiasco and dumpster fire than it would have been already. And so in the end, all this kind of this law breaking that occurs frequently at Thurston County and all these departments with too many Evergreen State College grads and all kinds of other problems and people not paying attention and the missing money at the Atrium Fund, and I don't know if people are stealing it. Where did that money go? Millions of dollars missing. Nobody seemed to care or know, and they certainly like to spend more money. And along the way, lots of laws get broken. This seems to be common behavior generally, but at least in this case, that one person's breaking the law actually saved us from everyone else's breaking the law here. So that was probably a good thing. However, I also kind of went down the rabbit hole a little bit more because people ask these questions all the time. And since I'm on this topic, let me just get into just a couple things before I close. Number one, there's always this big question about where do my property tax dollars get squandered? Everybody wants to know that, particularly when they have to pay those bills. And if you're looking at this video, this last week in October, you're paying that second half of your property taxes probably. And you're wondering, why did I have to pay so much and where exactly is it going? And no surprise, if you've paid much attention in the past, most of your property tax dollars really do go to schools. Now, about 23% of it roughly goes to the state of Washington so that the bureaucrats at OSPI, which is the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, they can take their cut and they can kick and waste a lot more money at the head bureaucracy, kind of black hole of education there. And then they send the rest of that money back and distribute it to the school districts around the state. The other part of that, which is about 37.8%, I think, roughly in Thurston County, that's like local levies. This is your bonding and your local amount that your levy, lid lift, whatever it was that you might have passed. Generally, those are taxpayer voted on increases. And so if you do want to take about 38% of the tax burden off of local property owners, you could do that by just voting no on every levy moving forward. Then you also have the fire district, which tends to be the second highest levy collection rate in Thurston County. I think it's important to look at the fire district and realize that this really is the second largest taxing authority, essentially, when they collect their money every year. Now, the county and the roads, when you combine the two of them together, they're almost the same amount as the fire district. And the reason why I say county and roads, there's two different levy amounts. The roads are only assigned to unincorporated the county area. So if you live outside of one of the cities, then you're being assessed for the roads. If you live inside the cities, you are not being assessed for the roads. However, the county tax is applied everywhere. And that's, again, 11 to 12%, roughly about the same when you add those two together. And then if you're a city dweller, then you're paying roughly 7.4%. And this does vary by city, but you pay, that's where part of your property taxes are going, is to help the city there. Now, so you're not paying for roads, but you're paying for cities. So you're essentially paying 4% more than somebody who lives rurally on average. And then the Medic 1 levy is the 3.4%. And then there is smaller taxes after that all get kind of combined together. Library district, port district, conservation district, cemetery district if you're in one of those areas. A bunch of these little smaller taxing districts that really don't amount to very much on your property tax statement. It's a much smaller percentage, really in the single digit, 1% range or something like that. Just small amounts. Nevertheless, it all adds up to a fairly big tax bill, which is why when these levies come out, definitely be thinking about that. If you just want to vote for a levy and then you're complaining about your tax rates, well, you should probably think about what your vote brought you when you voted that way. So this is one of the reasons why I do like Doge training and getting people more involved and engaged and paying attention to what's going on with local government. I think it really matters a lot. The Doge training, or just that mentality, if nothing else, allows and encourages people to know that they can dig in and hold government more accountable. And then sometimes what you think that you have found that's a big scandal or a problem, when you go and you dig deeper, it's not going to be that. Now, I have to tell you, you may not be what you thought you were looking for, but along the way, you're going to probably uncover a whole bunch of other things. That's typically what happens most of the time. In looking for where the missing millions of dollars disappeared in the Atrium building, we're finding all kinds of other problems in Thurston County, and that's going to be typically the type of scenario that you're going to find where you live in your government today as well. But again, at the end of the day, the only way you get to the bottom of it in these things is if you're willing to show up and actually dig in and do the homework. And I think it sometimes is easier if you do it as a team, have other people looking at things that they're more interested in and comparing notes. That's oftentimes one of the ways you get to the bottom of what's going on in a local community. It still requires people to show up. It requires you to show up if you care and you want to be involved and engaged and help hold government accountable. Because at the end of the day, like I always say, the future belongs to those who show up.